Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's episode of How to Market Your Co-working Space the Simple Way.
This podcast is brought to you by Cowork.tools. Super simple onboarding for new members to your workspace. Cowork Tools sorts out your GDPR, your AML, and your KYC. There's even a collaborative payment platform. Of course, I know what all of that means. So stop messing around with your onboarding and get back to building your co-working community. Head to Cowork.tools to get started. Bye!
And this, in our luxury Berlin studio, is my friend and collaborator, Sam. Hello, Sam. What are you known for?
Hello, Bernie. It's great to be chatting with you today. So I work in marketing at Cobot here in Berlin. So Cobot is co-working management software. We've been around for about 10 years now. We used to run our own co-working space, and that turned into us creating a tool to help us manage our space, offering this tool to other people, and now we are active in over 90 countries, and we get a lot of opportunities to market our product and see what's happening. And my favorite is to go to co-working spaces and see what people are doing all around the world to market their space and chat with their community.
And that's one of the reasons I pulled you in here today, is because we just before we started recording, we were talking about what people do and don't do and fads, and I think that's where I want to kick off today, because you must look at a lot of co-working space websites, and I know I'm going to pick you up your background in media and radio and video and putting stuff together. You must look at, I hope you do, because it will be a crap podcast if you can't follow this, but you must look at spaces and think, what are they doing, or they could do this better, and where do you think people are missing a trick, if you like?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest trick, I would say, is just that people always chase after the latest fad. So a few years ago everybody had a Snapchat. Now everybody's got a TikTok. It's always the flashy one. You get the vanity metrics, is what I like to call them. How many followers we got, how many subscribers, how many views. But at the same time, you neglect the fundamentals. And really, a good website, a good newsletter, and a good selection of photos on Google Maps are probably the three biggest indicators of how much attention you're going to get online. And I can't stress that enough.
I mean, as people know, I wildly agree with that. So let's go through those three. Why are they important? Because they are important, but sometimes people need to understand why they're important to actually connect with why that's a better use of time than 1,000 followers on. I don't know if you even know if you can have followers on TikTok, but
yeah, I don't feel old until I look at TikTok, and then I say I don't know what I'm doing anymore. But yeah, I think that the value starts from when people are looking for your space. So if someone is looking for a co-working space, where are they going to find you? They're not going to be looking through Instagram, as nice as it is, as good of you've spent so much time curating your photos and your image. They're probably going to be Googling co-working space, or they're going to be Googling co-working space near me, or co-working space for freelancers. You want the first thing they see to be those nice photos that you spent all that time curating in the place they actually are. So really, spend the time on getting good photos, a good write-up. Try and ask your members for some good reviews, because this is the first place that people are actually going to see you. And it's going to be way more than you think. So you want to make sure that you're catching them, because if you lose them on this first step, they'll never come back. You're probably not going to reach them. From there,
I would say that a Google My Business page nowadays is as important as your website. Not instead of, but the way it shows up, particularly in search, is super important.
Oh, I think I would probably even say it's more important, because I've gone to places that have good Google photos and images and reviews and everything that draws someone in, where their website is maybe a little bit subpar or at least lacking in certain areas. But I can say sometimes I'll see a website from a space and they don't have any presence on Google, and I don't even know if it still exists. I don't even know if it's still active. So I think that is really, it's key. It's 100% required. And from there, you get to the website, and this is also, it's kind of bad to think about it this way, but if you want your first like seal of authenticity or legitimacy, you really need to show that you've taken your website seriously, because that is such an easy place to show off where you come from and your community. And if you don't have good stories there, if you don't have good photos, if you don't have some level of web design, you're basically losing out on the first opportunity someone has to really get introduced to your space. And if they're going there and looking for a contact form and they can't find it, or if they go there and they're wondering, is this space for me? I'm wondering because I need a printer, or I need, what really matters to me are workshops, and they can't find that information, then you're going to lose them. And once again, these are people, you might not know you're losing them. You might see website traffic and it's only a fraction of a percentage between 2.4, 2.6, or however many people are clicking through. But you have lost those people and they're probably not coming back.
What do you think keeps people on a co-working space website?
I mean, I think it depends what your main pitch is. So if you're a space that's going after, I don't know, creatives in a city, you'd better have a website that does something interesting. I think looking at the places I know and trying to figure out my own train of thought, I usually go to an about page and see what they say. And if it says founded in 2017 for the community, I realize, well, they haven't really thought about what the about is actually for. An about page, a community page, our stories page, or something like that, they're really to say what the potential is, right? You want to get across what matters to you. You also want to get across why somebody should be interested in joining your community. And you should say, we're for these creative communities. What brings us joy is to run workshops for freelancers who aren't getting enough exposure to, I don't know, whatever the circumstances are. Like maybe your passion is in connecting, or it's in like 3D printing, or you're in some sort of workshop phase. You're, what am I thinking? Like makerspace. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. You're doing a makerspace, and your about us says, we've been involved in makerspace projects for 5 years. That's not really selling your space. You want to talk about all the stuff that's happening every day with some photos and examples and smiling people working on projects, because that's what people are looking for.
That's the big thing. Like, I'm a complete story brand fanboy, and one of the things that attracted me to that kind of framework or methodology is how deeply it rams home that it's about the person. And in London, we used to run this kind of wannabe Letterman show called the Late Breakfast Show, and the tagline was "It's all about you." Because this was like 10 years ago, but we would go to so many events where it'd be like Sam and Bernie talking about Sam and Bernie rather than the audience, and you get and it's not just co-working spaces. Everything does it. There's a web design company around here that tells me how great they are, and how they've been on the internet since 2000 and nothing, and then how important content is. And then you go to their blog, and they posted a blog 3 years ago saying, we'll be sending regular updates about what's happening in the office. So, and I know people get busy, and it's really hard to, it's, as you know yourself from the Cobot blog, it's hard keeping on top of that stuff, but that's what makes the digital footprint. And having it all about, my horrible scathing tagline is people who say there's a restaurant down the road here, and until a few years ago it said, and I mean a few years ago, like 3 years ago, it said winner of Evening Standard Best Restaurant. I can't remember the category was, Best Restaurant 2012. So 5 years ago, it was Best Restaurant in a category in the local newspaper, and they had that up there for ages, and no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
In fact, it makes me more suspicious when people talk about themselves.
Yeah, and especially, co-working spaces have a huge advantage here. A lot of other businesses look at this sort of advice, or they hear this sort of advice, and they say, well, how do we tell a story about our B2B SaaS company? Or how do we tell a story about our, very niche manufacturing success story? That's a lot harder. Co-working spaces have an advantage because their space is constantly filled with people who are doing interesting things. Their spaces are filled with people who are working in the community, who have interesting stories to share, and who probably are looking for ways to tell their story. Not everybody's going to want to share, but if you go around and you talk with the members in your space and you say, hey, can we talk about what you do on our website? There's a good chance that 90% of people are going to take you up on that. And there's no reason not to use that.
And as I've done that in lots of projects and spaces I've been in, inside and outside of co-working, is for some people that is their first kind of piece of PR or first chance they've talked about themselves outside of their own little bubble, and it's great because I think, and you can comment, I think it gives people confidence when someone asks them what they do, and then other people find out what they do. And one of the biggest things for me in a co-working space and community is actually finding out what other people do. And there's only a few people I will ever end up talking to, not because I don't want to talk to them, but if I read that on a website, there's people in Maynard where I am that I've found out what they do because I've read about them on the website, not because I've talked to them in the kitchen. It's nuts.
Yeah, well, I tend to think that most people want to talk about what they're doing. Like, it doesn't matter how dry you think your own work is. You have insights, right? If you do something for long enough, you start to have insights about it. But most people would never voluntarily suggest it. Like, you're not going to go up and say, hey, I do accounting for local businesses. Do you want to feature me on your website? Like, they're not going to come up to you and do that. But if you go up and say, hey, do you have any interesting stories about people you've helped? Do you have any stories about how you got involved in this? What are you doing outside, on your outside hours? How does that involve your work? People love to talk. People want to have those conversations. And that's the kind of stuff that, if I see it on a website. I was just looking up one of our spaces the other day, someone that uses Cobot, and they were talking about this local design award, and it was in Wyoming, and they had designed this really interesting looking shovel. And I went on a whole internet rabbit hole excursion, seeing, oh yeah, wow, this is an interesting company, and they do this interesting stuff, and they're working in manufacturing, they're doing stuff in the community. Like, this is great. These are the kind of stories that more people should be sharing. And yet I'll go onto other people's websites and see just the most general information about their company or about their organization. And I think it's just such a missed opportunity.
What do you, just to tangent a bit, I had a moment about 5 years ago when I suddenly realised how big the internet is. So I'd be like, oh, only I don't know if I'm going to bother posting that because only like 6 people will see it. And then ages ago, me and my friend Niels launched this online Trello course, which was going to make us millionaires by the end of the month. And there's a whole another lesson about having an email list ready to sell to there, but which we skipped over. But still, I know, like on my website, even though it's like out of date, I get thousands of hits. I don't know. I can't remember the exact metric, but I get a lot of people coming to my website because of that Trello blog and about how to connect Trello to Slack, which is old news now, but 5 years ago that was bleeding edge.
Yeah.
But people still arrive there, and then over time I thought, God, if I'd started posting something really useful 5 years ago, I would be, ranking of it, really high. And then I got an idea of like how many people look at what you do on the internet if you bother putting it there.
Oh yeah, and I think that to that point, you say, what would you have been doing, or what would it look like now if you've been putting out stuff that's good? I think you really just need to start putting stuff out. I think waiting for something to be good often drives one to put out less. And I think looking at what a blog does and looking at how the website returns work, it's all about this long-term return, and you really get this long-term investment. And it doesn't matter, even if it's not great, having something out there tomorrow will help you in a year. It'll help you in 2 years. It'll help you in 5 years. It'll help you in 10 years. And you can always go back and update it. You can always go back and link to other things and say, oh yeah, I wish I'd included this. But getting that content out there and making it regular helps so much more than saying, oh, we got 1,000 new followers on Facebook or on Twitter or on TikTok or whatever. Those types of website views are much more valuable.
So, something that to reinforce that point, there's Marcus Sheridan, who's elsewhere on this podcast, and we'll link to in the show notes. I listened to Marcus on a podcast in, I think it's like 2011, and he was one of the first people to start using HubSpot, and he had a fiberglass swimming pool, and a lot of people who are listening to this podcast will heard this story for ages. And I used to do this talk in about 2012, 2013, based on Marcus's fiberglass swimming pool resurrection, which was how one man made 4.4 million from one blog post. And people would come to this talk because they were like, oh my God, you can make that amount of money from one blog post. And his blog, it's like you having a blog post, which is how much does co-working space software cost? And it was how much does a fiberglass swimming pool cost? And I was chatting to him this year, and I said, so how much is that post made? And he said, well, we posted it in May 2009, and through HubSpot, we have tracked $10 million worth of revenue, and it's probably made us 15 million because people have posted it on LinkedIn. There's places it hasn't been tracked, but it's been shared. So that is what people look for. Not, no one's Googling. They're based in Virginia. Best Small Business Award 2009 Virginia. They're Googling how much does that cost, and I thought he was doing quite well years ago on 4.4 million, because that's a massive amount of money. And can you imagine writing one thing at your kitchen table in 2009 and then tracking that amount of revenue a decade later?
I can't imagine tracking a tenth of that revenue a decade later, but yeah, it's so hard to predict what's going to take off and what isn't. But the only thing that I can say for certain won't take off is something that's never posted. And if you don't put in that effort, it's not glamorous, but you'll never see those sorts of returns. I'm a big fan of just do it, what is it, JFDS? Just
JFDI.
JFDI, yeah. Because I think I personally know that I've had those moments in life where I'm like, this isn't 100% what I want. If I had another 3 days, or if I had another week, or if I had another month, I could really refine this. But that time doesn't exist, right? That time is for other things. So just do it.
So Lindsay, who's also on this podcast, for about 3 years now, I've been part of this 90-day challenge where there's a group of us in a Slack channel, and we all commit to posting one piece of content, whether that's a podcast, blog, YouTube thing. And I've this is the first time I've got all the way through. So, I posted a lot, but never missed a week, posted it every week. And, every time I go through that iteration, I get much better. I love writing, I really enjoy it. It's not like it's hard to do, but I always have, some kind of fear that Sam from Cobot will read it and think it's shit, so I better not post it. And there's one guy in there, Colin, who 3 years ago when we started doing this was really nervous about, and he's a really smart guy. He's a designer, Pixels Inc., and he's on here too. And he just started making YouTube videos, and now he has 20,000 people following on YouTube, and all his business comes from YouTube, and he's educated his audience through doing that. And there's lots of other stories like that, and it all became from like just kind of shipping, and everyone in that group. I suppose this is about 10 or 15 of us that have been through it for the whole thing, and it seems like a long slog while you're doing it, but we've all got really good at posting posting content online and, helping people. It's great for business, but it's also helping people and connecting with people. Talking of connecting with people, Sam, where can we find you?
Well, you can find out more about me on our website at www.cobot.me. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, the usuals, LinkedIn. I'm on Medium. You should check out the Cobot blog. That's where most of my content ends up being these days. And that's blog.cobot.me.
We can put a link in the show notes, and that I was going to be nasty about Mark Navarro there, but there's some really, really good posts. And folks, it is in English and Spanish.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Bernie. This was a great conversation.
Take care, and be careful out there. It is a jungle.
Yeah, stay safe.
Thank you very much for your time today. As a co-working space owner or manager, you may never know where to start with your marketing, even if you know exactly what needs to be done. Are you always stopping and starting communication for your co-working space? Get distracted by shiny things and new fads? Do you blog once a year and not even know why you're blogging? If you're like me, you've read hundreds of books on business and marketing, but still get stuck in action. How often have you done the same thing 12 weeks in a row? Head to berniejmitchell.com and hit the green book a call button to spend a few hours with me to nail a simple 90-day marketing plan you will actually execute on. We'll work out a 12-week plan of content, emails, and other actions to build your sales funnel. I'm 100% confident I can help you. So confident, in fact, I'll give you your money back right on the spot at the end of our call if you don't find our time together useful. In the last decade, I've helped hundreds of people get clear on where to go next, what tools to use, and how to stay consistent with their marketing. Head to berniejmitchell.com and book a call today.